What is going on, Sens fans? Welcome to another pregame edition, the Everyday Sens podcast, here to preview the Carolina Hurricanes visiting the Ottawa Senators on this Tuesday, December 12th. It's 12/12/23. Brennan, how you doing tonight? Coming live from Edmonton, Alberta.
Yeah, I'm doing good. We've got a game day here. Ottawa has won 3 of their last 4 tonight. They play a Carolina team who's been struggling, so now it's really like this is their chance here to get back above 500, keep proving that they can beat good teams. Because even though Carolina is struggling right now, they're still 14-12 on the year. They've been really good. So yeah, I think it's a good matchup for Ottawa, and I think this is their last game on home ice before a 5-game road trip, and it's going to be a hard road trip. So you got to build a bit of a cushion for yourself. At 12-11 would be a decent record. So yeah, I mean, this is just, it comes back to what we talked about with the Rangers, where it's like losing to bad teams early in the year means you have to beat good teams. And this is a very winnable game. Like, regardless of how Carolina's done on the year, I do think this is a winnable game for Ottawa. I think they need to take advantage of teams who are struggling. And Carolina did this whole soul searching thing that we talked about last night on the episode. And it's like, who cares? Like, just screw these guys over. Give them 5 losses in a row. That's all we want to see tonight. Same lineup for Ottawa. Korpisalo starts. I think, yeah, like on paper, I really like the matchup. Carolina obviously has a lot of depth. I know you've got the whole Brennan Lemieux versus Brady Tkachuk thing too, so it's going to be a ton of different storylines to follow. And then Ottawa too, like we're used to these big breaks in the schedule, but they play like at least every 2 days for the next couple weeks, I think. And I know they play Thursday and Friday coming up, so they've got a ton of games. Seems like they're thriving. Like, they're kind of owning the whole mentality of like, when they're playing more games, they're playing better, because that's what they talked about coming into December. They said the breaks in the schedule kind of made us like it was just kind of an inconsistent thing, and that makes it hard to find a groove and momentum. They're proving right now that that actually is important and that it matters, because they're really building on each and every game. So yeah, we can dive right into it, because we've got a few things to talk about here with an hour until puck drop.
It's a couple, a couple different storylines here. Obviously, this is a rematch of the opening night of the season, which was a pretty entertaining game from all angles, right? Like, it came down to the wire. Carolina took over in the last minute. Ottawa stormed back, whatever it was. Didn't go the Sens' way. Carolina looked like they always have, but yeah, they've been interesting this year because they've kind of been um, inconsistent, I'd say, and really in a lot of ways similar to Ottawa, but expectations are a lot higher. Obviously, in Carolina, they got cup aspirations. They were the cup favorite actually coming into the season. So it's different when you look at these records that are scrolling across the bottom here. You've got 14-2-1 for Carolina and then 11-11 for Ottawa, where the Sens have won 3 of 4. Carolina's lost 4 in a row, and you've got two teams right around the 500 mark. So it is early in the year, so you still can't really get a sense of what teams are all about. But Carolina seems to be a team that has struggled with goaltending, and Ottawa is a team that is not struggling to put the puck in the net. So it kind of has all the makings of being a high-scoring game. Sens, yeah, like you mentioned, in this tough schedule so far, they're thriving. They've looked great in December, as per usual. Got away with not playing a ton of games in November, which was not a great month for them. So I don't know, man. Like, again, I don't know what to expect. We previewed last week against the Rangers, so a week ago today, and seemed like a much more daunting task ahead of them. But then a week later, you look back and they went 2-1 in the last 3 games, played some really good hockey. So I'm looking forward to it. I think with all of the expectation around them coming into the year, it feels like they're finally starting to play up to that, even if the record doesn't indicate it yet. So maybe it's tough when you've got a contender like this, like Carolina, who's struggling. I wanted to bring up the betting odds, and we don't talk a lot about betting, I guess, on our show, but I think I've mentioned it. But what I'm doing this year is I'm keeping track of the Sens odds going into every game, and funny enough, they are 500. This is crazy to me. So like 500 is going to be the theme here, all right? So they're 500 at the Canadian Tire Center or at home, like not technically at the Canadian Tire Center, but when they have home ice advantage and those 2 Sweden games count, they are 500. Away from the Canadian Tire Center, they are 500. When they are favored in games before the game, they're 500. And when they're not favored, they're also 500. So legitimately a coin flip, any which way you spin it. And it's kind of unique. I don't know. That's why I was going with the 12-12-23 thing off the top there, the date being December 12th. It's that weird little parallel that only happens once every month. So I found it interesting that legitimately in every aspect, they're 500. I like looking at stats like that, just home and away records and all of that, seeing where teams are good. I just found that kind of interesting. So it's probably the only time this season that's going to be able to be said, hopefully, because you don't want them to keep trending like this inconsistently back and forth. But I'm just looking at Carolina's road record right now, and what I'm kind of going for here is cup contending teams tend to be very good on the road as well. They play a different style than they do at home. Carolina is a very shot aggressive team. They don't allow a lot of shots. They are first in the NHL in shots on goal, and they're first in the NHL in shots on goal allowed. So it could be a tough one for Ottawa. Like I mentioned, goaltending's been tough for Carolina. So let's just skip right into a couple segments here. We did do an episode last night, so we've briefed ourselves essentially, and people who were able to watch it and listen to it today have been briefed on our thoughts on everything Detroit and all of that. So we won't really talk about that because we've already broken it down after watching this live. If you want to have a little intermission listening, go and check that out. It's a next page, next show you'll see on our YouTube page. But yeah, so some players to watch. Like, who are you looking to see more from on the Sens? A bounce back game, whatever it is, and you can throw a guy in Carolina out there as well. I just a random prompt here for us to get going, because I'll be honest, Carolina can be a pretty boring team, but they're that good that they're boring, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, I'm just looking at the analytics a little bit too. And like, Carolina is a very good 5v5 team. They create a lot of chances. They have among the most expected goals for per 60 in the league, and high danger chances and stuff. But they've kind of struggled to put the puck in the net a little bit. They've got a very low PDO, which means they've kind of had some terrible luck like Ottawa last year. They also give up like among the fewest high danger chances at 5v5, which is not pitting well for the Sens. But at the same time, their 5v5 goaltending has not been very good. Their high danger save percentage is like bottom 5 in the league. So if Ottawa can get a few good looks, that's where they're going to take advantage of them. Their special teams too is like 16th and 19th for power play penalty kills. So kind of a special teams battle tonight. I think Ottawa has to take advantage of that. My player to watch tonight, I'm going to go with how do we not? We're going to talk about him, but Jake Sanderson, 100th game for Jake Sanderson tonight. I know you put a tweet out saying he's going to be active and stuff. Actually, that might have been Martian too, but you talked about Jake Sanderson and how this is going to be a huge game for him. I agree, because he's been on another level, right? He's been elite, and I mean like elite. Like it's a word we throw around a little bit, but I think Sanderson's been at that level. He has been just a dominant defenseman in the NHL. Like, I know we talked about on this morning's episode where he ranks among league defensemen. And it's hard to say because it's such a small sample size and he's really taking off this year. But you look at the longevity for guys like Makar and that type of player. If we just looked at this year and Sanderson's performance this year compared to every other defenseman's performance this year alone, like, I have a hard time thinking that he's outside of like the top 10, 15 defensemen. He's been that good. His analytics match it, the eye test matches it. Like, he's a very influential player in the outcome of every game, right? He's like, he gets the puck on his stick. He skates it out himself. He makes crisp passes. It's the defending, right? The elite defending with almost no penalties. It's insane. Like, it's hard for the opposition to do anything when he's on the ice because, yes, the defending and like the active stick and his skating, but also because he's so good with possession. Like, he can skate it. He can pass it. He can attack the neutral zone. He'll jump into the offensive zone. He'll go into the corner. Like, he literally does everything. He's so good for the Sens possession. So I think Sanderson's the guy to watch in his 100th game. And the production now is starting to catch up too. Like, he's got very like 5 goals and he's very impressive. Production is starting to match the impressive defensive play. The league is beginning to take notice. So again, I think Sanderson, like the Sens, if he can come out and have a good game against these top tier teams, even though Carolina's struggling, that's how you make a name for yourself, because people are going to be watching this game. People are going to see the highlights. Like, if you see Jake Sanderson shutting down Evgeny Sveshnikov, Sebastian Aho, that's where you kind of make a name for yourself. So he's my guy to watch. Give me one of yours for Ottawa.
I'm kind of debating here, but I'm going to go with a guy who I haven't been hard on him, and he's still having a great year, but just very hot and cold. And I'm going to talk about the captain and Brady Tkachuk. I mentioned the Rangers game from last week that we previewed. He was an absolute monster in that game, got the scoring started. He had 2 goals, actually. It was his 5th 2-goal game of the season, which is crazy. I believe it's 5 2-goal games. The thing with Tkachuk that I'm not concerned with, but it is the consistency a little bit, right? Like, the goals are there. And against the Leafs, I think TSN was interviewing him and just talking about how he's on pace for 50 goals. And they were doing the Keith Tkachuk graphics and the 200 penalty minutes, 50 goals thing. And to open the year, yeah, he had 4 goals in that home opening weekend. Like, he was on fire, but it doesn't feel like he's on a 50-goal pace. And I think people would agree with that. I went through it. He's only scored in 6 of their 22 games so far. So it feels a little underwhelming, but yeah, he scored 2-goal games. So in those games, he's a monster. I just find that in the games he hasn't scored, he's been a little bit quieter than I've noticed. And I think maybe um, he of all the top guys on in the forward core has been the biggest victim of line shuffling, I think, a little bit. Like, yeah, he's familiar with Norris, he's familiar with Giroux, but those three have never played together before. And quite frankly, Norris is not the best centerman on this team. So Tkachuk is not really playing on the top line per se anymore. So I think it's just taking him a little bit of time. Now, look, I'm fully like he's still been great, and if they're winning hockey games like 5-2 or whatever, and Brady Tkachuk doesn't have a point, that's not a problem. He's been better defensively this year. He's still getting involved. But that Rangers game is one I'm pointing out because he was a monster in that one, and I think he gets up for games where he goes up against a bigger defenseman like Jacob Trouba. So a guy like Brent Burns, they've had some battles in the past. I think that's something to look for tonight. So I'm going to say Brady Tkachuk is going to be my player to watch, not because I'm disappointed. I just want to see a little bit more offensively out of him. I think he has also been a victim a little bit of the power play falling off. He hasn't really been a power play merchant for his career really, but he does get some points on the power play, and the Sens top unit especially has really struggled, to be honest. I don't think they have many goals in that core of like Norris, Batherson, Stutzla,
You got to get that
Tkachuk.
Norris shot going. What happened to that one timer?
That's
He
that's
cannot
something I
do it
want to
anymore.
mention. So when I said I was debating between two guys, I had Norris as my other one. Let's talk about him a little bit. I feel like we haven't really since his big return and whatever. And like the goal scoring's there. He's got some goals. I think his pace is right around the 35 goal pace for a full season, which is right where he should be. 60 points, 30 goals. What have you felt about Josh Norris? Because personally for me, I find he has been much better in the last 3 games. I want to say his legs have been better, but you're right. The shot just isn't there right now. The one-timer's not there. And as soon as teams start to realize it's not much of a threat, they're going to stop covering it. So maybe that's when he breaks through with that. But he had a couple of decent looks last game, but still has yet to connect on one of those patented one-timers on the power play, which is a reason that top unit's struggling.
Yeah, I, I think it's a combination of things. Like, I think teams are taking it away. And this is why I feel like Ottawa's power play should be better, though, is because it seems like teams are sort of cheating towards blocking those shots and kind of deflecting them and getting in the lane, making it really hard for him to get into his prime, wheelhouse position. The thing is, I think it's a great chance. Like, if teams are taking that away, you're already on a 5-on-4. Like, if they're committing a player to Josh Norris and taking that shot away, that's when you can set other things up. That's when there's more space to operate. That's when the bumper becomes available. Like, I think if they're taking that away and it's not working, like, let Norris fire a few, make them think, okay, they're going to keep trying to set Norris up and then set something else up. Like, there's going to be more space. They're going to start cheating. That's just naturally what we do as humans. As you see something over and over and over, like teams pre-scout, they've seen Josh Norris. Everybody knows Josh Norris ranked like 4th in the league with 16 power play goals a couple of years ago or last year, whatever it was. They know that Ottawa's strategy is to get him the one-timers. So trick them. Like, dude, set it up like you're going to give Norris the one-timer. Have him do like a fake slap shot down to the goal line and then set up the bumper play. That's all you got to do. Like, it's that type of thing you can kind of take advantage of. But again, you have to do it because, I mean, regardless of that, I think Norris still needs to score some goals in the power play. Like, that's where he really should be thriving because that's his kind of patented thing. But it's just not working. I think goalies are kind of cheating over to it as well. That's another thing. It seems like the goalies are expecting it. They know when Norris is lined up there, they're going to kind of inch that way and be ready to go, right? Because they know he's going to fire that one-timer. But yeah, I mean, I've been happier with his play overall. Goals are the big thing for him. He's known as a sniper. He had the 35 goals before. But honestly, like when he came in as a rookie, like he was a good player with the puck. He's someone you wanted to have the puck on his stick. He's impactful, right? He's a two-way center. I thought through his first handful of games this year, we didn't really notice him enough. Like as a center, you want to be noticing him. It's not like it's Bernard Docker where you don't want to see him. Like with Norris, you want to notice him on the ice. You want to see him making plays. And I still want to see him kind of carry the puck a little bit more. Find that's one thing that he looked really good at a couple of years ago is he would actually carry the puck a lot. He would be really good transitionally, and I just haven't seen a lot of it. But I will say, last game especially too, and he always gets fired up against Detroit because he's from Michigan. But I thought he was throwing the body a lot more. Like I love seeing that now. I love it, but I hold my breath. There was one big hit he tried to throw last game, like behind the net. I think he was just kind of like had the adrenaline. And I was like, oh dear God, he's gonna throw this hit and throw his shoulder out. But he didn't, and he looks pretty comfortable now. He's getting back into that groove. You can see him actually battling. I thought for the first handful of games too, he was pretty hesitant to go into the corners, rightfully so. I mean, you don't like imagine you go in when you just got back and something happens. It seems like now he's sort of actually getting more comfortable and willing to stick check and body check and use his body. So I think he's kind of finding his groove. But yeah, he's got 12 points in 19 games. I mean, that's not a bad pace at all. 6 goals, 6 assists. So he's a good one, and he's someone who I still want to see a little more from in regards to his overall impact, his defensive impact. But I'm certainly not disappointed with his play since coming back. So other than that, I'm going to throw up the Hurricanes lineup here too, just so we can have a quick look at that. I like to see what we can do. So just throwing it up, like forwards, you've got Nosen, Aho, Jarvis, Teravainen, Kotkaniemi, Natchez, Martinuk, Stahl, and Fast. Bunting, Drury, Lemieux. Like, I want to see somebody just take this guy out again. I don't even care. Like, give me another thing. The last time the last time they played that bite thing happened? I think so. There hasn't been a
No,
game since. Oh, there has.
he played for Philly last
Okay.
year, but he barely played, and like it was like he was a depth guy, kind of a scratch, kind of like he is here. But we'll see if anything comes of it. I don't think it will, but I mean, look, I'm saying I want to see a bit more from Brady Tkachuk, and it's kind of the perfect opponent for it to happen against, isn't it?
Yeah, and I agree with that too. Brady's been interesting because like you haven't noticed him as much either this year, and he actually leads the Sens with 56 hits. The closest to him has 31. That's Parker Kelly. Like that, he's still been this very impactful player. I just haven't seen enough consistency from Brady. I think also the whole like thing that happened with him kind of calling the fans out has also emphasized that, just because it's like you call the fans out, but then you have a handful of quiet performances. It's just, it doesn't sit right with you. But at the same time, he's still been he's got 19 points in 22 games, 13 goals. He's on pace for like 40, 50 goals. Like he's had an insane season in regards to production, and people are taking notice. Again, same thing with Norris. It's just you want to see more kind of overall impact, a little more consistency. I will say though, like I do like how he's playing with the puck a little bit more. I like how he's kind of making smart plays instead of just flinging everything at the net. By the way, though, if you are a better, like Brady Tkachuk shot totals every single game, just pound it every single game. You'll win like 90% of the time. He does fire everything at the net. It's his, like, he's always around the net, and it's like over 4.5 shots. He almost always hits it. It's crazy. So, anyways, moving off that, on defense for Carolina, we've got Slavin and Burns, Shea and Pesci, and Orlov and Chatfield. D'Angelo is a healthy scratch. And then I guess it's Kochikov who's starting tonight for them as well, because Freddie Anderson is still hurt and Ranta is the backup. So Kochikov has not had a very good season, if I'm remembering correctly. I think the last time I saw his stats, they're pretty underwhelming. And like I said, Carolina, like they've got among the worst high danger save percentage in the league. So although they do play a pretty tight game at 5v5, goaltending has been an issue for them, and that's because Anderson is out. So Ottawa can take advantage of that. They've been putting everything in the net, and it's a good matchup in that regard. But regardless, yeah, I think it's gonna be a tough game for them because the Hurricanes are so good at 5v5. But you know what? Ottawa ranks top 5 in almost every single metric since the start of December. Like they've been a dominant team at 5v5. But yeah, I think it's just gonna be, it's going to be a grind. It's going to be kind of one of those battling games. Carolina is a very grindy type of team, so I'm excited for it. But yeah, I mean, do you have anybody else you want to watch tonight? Maybe Jonas
Yeah,
Korpisalo too.
I was gonna mention Batherson a little bit because we haven't really talked about him. I did want to point out I was going to look at the road record for the Hurricanes, and it's 6-10. So the last 4 losses they had all in Western Canada. So they were 500, and that's submarined them a little bit. But obviously not as good of a team on the road as they are at home. They're kind of like, I'm watching a lot of football this season, and people always talk about how the Chiefs have, like, they're the best team in the league or whatever, but they haven't won a road playoff game with Patrick Mahomes or something like that. So that's a big storyline, and they might have to play one this season. Carolina's kind of the same way, aren't they? Like, they take advantage of home ice because I think they've won the Metro for 5 years in a row now. Like, they've been that good, or 4 seasons or whatever it is. They've won the division. So you clinch home ice for at least 2 rounds, which is exactly where they've made it for the last 4 seasons. They've made it to the second round. So yeah, it's interesting that their road record is that much worse than their home record, which is pointing to why they're not a dominant team, because at home they're 8-2-1. And that's it's a really good record. So it's a good chance for the Sens to, get above 500 at home. Not exactly at the CTC, but, obviously just an abysmal stretch they had in November at home with all those home games. So hopefully they can rectify that a little bit. But I did want to talk about Drake Batherson, because I feel like when he was playing poorly, everyone was talking about him. Like, he needs to be better. He's not that, is he going to be a good top six option that plays in your middle six, or what's he going to be? He's been fantastic pretty much for the last month. I want to say, like, he's been on fire. Like right before I think he scored against the Flames. I remember, and I remember him having a good game there. He looked great in Sweden, I thought. And then obviously that pass he made to Stützle in Detroit on Saturday was world class. When he's going, they're a dangerous hockey team, and you start to realize, like, oh yeah, this guy was their best offensive player 2 years ago, and a lot of those guys were still on this team, right? So it's not because they were a bad hockey team, they just have more weapons now. But Drake Batherson is a legit NHL player, a legit NHL top line talent when he plays at his best, and I think he has been the last month. So it really gives them another dynamic, I think, right? So you mentioned on the power play, Norris, with if the one timer is not there or they're taking it away, it opens up that bumper. Batherson scored on that, and I don't know who it was against, but they did do that play, and he scored on it. It's kind of recently. It might have been against Seattle. But that's what's exciting, I think, is that Batherson is picking it up, and the reason that it's exciting is because when you talk about Tkachuk and Norris maybe struggling a little bit at 5-on-5 offensively, production wise, when other guys pick it up, it's fine and you can survive, and they are, because they're winning hockey games. It's when Stützle and Batherson cool off a little bit, the other guys have to step up. So we'll cross that bridge. Maybe tonight's the night that happens, but so far right now, Stützle, Tarasenko, and Batherson is a scary line for any opposing team. Slavin and Burns are probably going to be out there as much as possible against those guys. So again, we'll open up a lot more space for Brady Tkachuk and Josh Norris, but it's kind of the players I want to watch. You mentioned Korpisalo a little bit there. Is he starting, or is it Forsberg tonight?
It's Korpisalo again. Yeah, he had a good game last game, so he's always someone to watch. It's like the keys to the game. You always just want to put the goalies, because I mean they really do decide the outcome. That's how important they are. Like Korpisalo, I've said it from the start of the year. I don't think he needs to steal games for Ottawa. He shouldn't have to. But like last game, he played a fantastic game. Like I don't even think he stole last game against Detroit. The thing against Detroit is Ottawa, like that game was 1-1. They went on to win 5-1, but that game was 1-1. Patrick Kane scored. Detroit had all the momentum. And then Korpisalo came up with a few big saves. Like, this is what they haven't been getting. And I don't want to blame the goalies at all, because it really isn't their fault if you look at the numbers. But at the same time, timely saves are huge. Cam Talbot had the same problem where it's like, it's a tie game, 1-1. Ottawa gives up their 1-0 lead. The momentum's kind of shifting. The building's getting kind of rowdy. You're on the road. And then a bad goal goes in, right? And it's like, that is how you lose the game, because that's a backbreaker. Like, that's what they call it. They call it a backbreaker. Now it's 2-1. The other team has all of the momentum. Like, it's hard to come back from that, even though it's only a 1-goal game. Korpisalo made all the saves he had to last game. So same thing again tonight. He's going to have to step up, because, again, Carolina generates among the most expected goals per 60 minutes. And just Batherson, too, I wanted to touch on. So kind of notable about him. So he's got 8 goals, which ranks third on the team, and 19 points in 22 games. 11 assists. What's notable there is 9 of those are primary assists. So that ranks second behind only Stützle at 10. Like, 9 primary assists is actually really goddamn. That's impressive. That means you are the catalyst behind a lot of Ottawa's goals. Also with Batherson, he had like a negative 35 rating last year, plus minus. We don't love that stat, but when it's that atrocious, like, there is something to it. He's at 0 right now. So he's worked his way back up to 0. He said in the offseason he knew that he was not good enough away from the puck, so he wanted to commit more to that. I thought he's had some lapses this year, but back up to 0. Since the start of December, he's been excellent in regards to his kind of will away from the puck. But yeah, his numbers are fantastic, very impressive. Also has the second most individual high danger chances on the team. So he's just creating a lot. He's been a net positive player, and that's what you want to see out of Drake Batherson, because he can get caught floating a lot. Like, that's kind of his issue, is when he's not skating hard, he gets caught drifting, he takes some hooking penalties, like the stick penalties, and he's just kind of gliding along. But when he's really skating, like, it's different, man. And that's why the ankle injury he had was so key, is that it kind of impacted his skating. He's never been like a super fast skater anyways, but when he gets going, when he gets his legs moving, he is a different player. And I really do think, like, he could be, I want him to be a 60-plus point player. That's what I see out of Drake Batherson. And he was last year, and I think he could be again moving forward. So that's really all I've got for the players to watch tonight, but we can get on to the next topics too.
I just keep finding stats that point to this team being so 500. It's not even funny. So Korpisalo is 6-6. Forsberg's 5-5. Like that. How crazy is that? That both of their goalies have, Korpisalo's obviously played 2 more games, so plays third more than Forsberg tonight. But like that alone, even if you're a 500 team, is really unlikely. Batherson being exactly 0 It's not because he hasn't been on for any goals against or goals for. He's teetering back and forth. He's a plus, looks like 4 or 5 in December right now, but he had it's. I'm just looking at it, and maybe I'm pointing out rant like nothing stats, but I just find it interesting. Like he had a -4 game against Buffalo earlier this year, and then he had a +3 game against the Rangers earlier. But then other than that, it's been -1, +1. Like he's never a crazy night. Like he has 2 outlier games. It's just I don't know why like it won't be the same ever again. Maybe it's something in the air. It's 12, 12, 23. But yeah, the Sens are like perfectly 500 right now, which is crazy to think about. But we can move on to Jake Sanderson. I know you mentioned him a little bit just to watch him tonight. I just want to talk about this kid because he's that good. And we don't we do a good job, I think, of pumping him up and pumping up Stützle and the good players when they make good plays and stuff like that. But with guys like Stützle and Sanderson, I worry that as a fan base, it happens with every team. You get complacent and you get used to watching guys do the same thing. And Stützle's really cleaned up his turnovers and stuff like that lately, especially in December, which is correlating. Everything's coming together here. But I think with a guy like Sanderson and Stützle, kind of lumping them together here, I don't want to get used to how they play. And I think I tweeted that it's his 100th game, and one day we're all going to realize how insane it was that we got to watch him every night. He's that kind of a player. So it's just kind of like that. We talked about it a little bit last episode there, but like he'll make a little play every shift where if you sit and watch Jake Sanderson play and just isolate on him, it's a wonder why no one else talks about him like Sens fans do. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like he to me has just solidified himself as the best defenseman on this team. 2 penalty minutes in 22 games with the minutes he plays, the situations he's in, how much he uses his stick too, which I think is kind of underrated for that kind of a defenseman. He never has a lazy stick. No tripping, hooking penalties. He's so smart. What have you been impressed with Jake Sanderson? Is a loaded question, but what have you been impressed with number 85 this year, or just through his first 100 games? Because in glass half full, glass half empty kind of thing, 100 games seems like a long time, and it's crazy. It's already been that many games for him at such a young age and whatever it is, but also so much runway left in his career. Like I think average for the average NHLer is like, I don't know, 500-600 games, or like 400 games when they get that benefit for a pension or something like that. So this is crazy to me that he's at 100 already. But what have what stood out aside from the obvious with Jake Sanderson for you?
Well, yeah, the penalty minutes are the biggest thing. That's always been his key, is that he's so masterful at defending without taking penalties. Like if you watch him play, he'll take the stick and he'll swing it around, and it's just all about body positioning and the way that he kind of moves his feet and angles himself into position, because it's so easy. Like if you watch a player get behind him, and I'm still doing a film study on him. I've got like a million clips, so I watched a bunch of his individual shifts, and like players will get behind him because he'll play high because he knows he can recover. So like they'll get behind him, and then most guys, they would come in, they'd take a hooking penalty or a holding penalty. You get kind of reaching around the waist a little bit, but he comes in and he's so quick and so good at reaching around and knocking the puck, just disrupting them a little bit, just enough to prevent a shot or a quality shot without taking a penalty. And it's like consistent every game. He never takes a penalty. What I've been impressed with this year the most, though, has been his play with the puck, actually, because last year he was still defending like that. We kind of got used to it, but last year I didn't think he was really like he was good with the puck, but he was firing a lot of perimeter shots, just like he'd skate it from one end to the other, and then he'd fire like a bad shot. This year, I'm really impressed with how he's really skating. He's setting up. He's making smart plays. He's had some really, like, he hit the crossbar last game too. Had some really good looks, creating good chances for himself. His shot has really improved too. His shot is lethal, like wrist shot, slap shot, the whole thing. But yeah, I mean, I think in the offensive zone, if you watch him play, last year he was not stepping up like he does this year. That's a kind of a poise thing and a comfort thing. He's like consistently almost every shift in the offensive zone, stepping up, going around behind the net, skating with the puck, sidestepping players, creating lanes for himself. That's why the production is starting to follow suit, is that he's a catalyst with the puck. He makes things happen. When he's got the puck on his stick, you think that there's a good chance something very good is about to happen. So I think that's what I've been most impressed, is how he's added that kind of dynamic ability. Because again, we always talk about it at the draft. What did everybody say about him? What did all the scouts say? They said that he lacked offensive upside. They said he had no offensive upside. He was just a defensive defenseman. Those don't usually go very high in the draft. But like, the Sens saw something different, right? They saw his skating ability. They saw that kind of raw offensive talent, and he's just putting it all together now. And you can see it every game. Like, he looks more comfortable every single game. 100 is crazy because I think he's still only 21 years old, maybe 22 now. No, 21. So yeah, like that's nuts that he's already played that much. It's awesome to see though, because again, I think that this guy, like, I don't even think it's bold to say. I think he's going to go down as one of the best defensemen in Ottawa Senators history at the end of the day. Like, if he's already a top 20 guy in the NHL, like, he's going to go down as one of the best alongside those other high names. I'm going to ask you a bold question too. Does Jake Sanderson ever win the Norris Trophy in Ottawa?
Uh, I mean, easy answer obviously is yes, but I'm gonna say no just because there's 32 teams now. I think maybe in a way it kind of, with the rise of analytics and stuff like that, I don't think if analytics were so used and so utilized by every team, every scout, every reporter, whatever it was, I don't know if Erik Karlsson wins both of those Norris trophies, to be honest, because in those years he wasn't the best analytically. And I mean, he could have won 4 given the era that it was, but I think that it was very, very special what Karlsson did. Karlsson came in at the age that Sanderson is now and won a Norris Trophy, which is insane to think, right? Like if I mean, and listen, it's still possible. I just think with scoring being so high, all the offensive talent on defense around the league, having a guy like Cale Makar on the same kind of timeline, it'll be tough, but look, I'm not going to put it past him. He's that good. Listen, like he's not talked about in the same breath, or hasn't anyway, been enough with Owen Power, hasn't been talked enough with Rasmus Dahlin, hasn't been talked with Miro Heiskanen, like all that, like kind of second tier of defensemen, right? I think he absolutely can. I think he can. We went through every single team that we thought the Sens would kind of be competing with. That's our big exercise in August, right? Was going through every team that they were going to be competing with. And admittedly, we both admitted that, yeah, the Sens have a great blue line, but every single one of those teams had a guy that was better than all 3 of the Sens studs at the time. And I think what we're going to realize at the end of this season is that Jake Sanderson is going to put himself in that conversation, like with a Charlie McAvoy, with Victor Hedman, like the guys who are not quite the best, like an Adam Fox, Makar, Quinn Hughes kind of thing, but he's right up there. And I'm ready to say that now. I think my favorite thing about Jake Sanderson, and I always go back to it, but it's important. I said it on our first ever episode. He's the Conn Smythe kind of winner that you have. He's going to be the guy who locks down the other team's top players. And I noticed it last year when they played the Edmonton Oilers. He seems like, and you don't want to be like, oh, he's got that dog in him or whatever. That's the meme, but he does, and he seems to thrive when he's up against the best in the world. And I think that is some. It's, you can't teach it. It's just competitive nature. And when you're that detailed defensively, you are a defenseman. Like he seems to just love the shutdown role, which I think is so vital and so valuable to have when you've got a guy who's like, coach, put me out there against the best player we've ever seen. I want to be the guy to shut him down. I want to be the reason Connor McDavid doesn't get a point tonight and we win a hockey game. That's value you can't compensate for. You can't adjust for that kind of value in a chart or whatever it is. Like he's just that competitive. I think his competitive nature has really popped for me in these 100 games. So really looking forward to the next 100. And I cannot believe he signed that contract, because oh boy, it would look a little bit different if we were still talking. Like the points are there. He's going to shatter his career high this year, but it's more just like, it's the shutdown role. Like I mentioned, I went to that home opening weekend, like I mentioned, and against Tampa was the game I really noticed it. Zub and Sanderson didn't have a shift at 5-on-5, or they didn't play against Kucherov, Braden Point, and I think it was Hagel that night because Stamkos was injured. They saw them every single time, and that line did absolutely nothing all night. That is what value Jake Sanderson brings. And yeah, it was Zub too, because Zub's a great defensive defenseman, but Sanderson's doing it now again with Jacob Bernard-Docker on his side, and JBD's played great, but Sanderson's clearly the common denominator. He carries every pairing he's on. He is the best defenseman on this team. I'd argue he's the best player on the Sens, even with Tim Stützle, but it's those two right now battling it out, and they're both 21 years old, which is insane. So I can rave about Jake Sanderson. I already am, but he's that good of a player. And I think as the Sens get better, he'll be a big part of that, obviously. But as the team's record gets better, it could be even this season, heads are going to turn. And you got to win hockey games to get league notice like that. So depending how good the team is, I do think he'll get some Norris love eventually. It'll just be interesting to see when and where that is, I guess. But in Ottawa, yeah, I'll say in Ottawa.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be up there in the discussions anyway, right? Like he's going to be up with the McAvoys, like you said. We just don't know, like if he can get up to that Adam Fox level of being like a truly number one debatable NHL defenseman, like I mean number one in the league. Like we'll see. But before we conclude here, I just want to hit on a couple of these quick questions. So I've got the I'll tee them up for you first. So these are from members of EverydaySens.com. I ask on the members only Instagram story just for mailbags every now and then, put some questions up, have some extra discussion on there. So feel free to check out everydaysense.com for that. But we're going to start off with a couple of questions just quick here because we've got puck drop coming soon. We're going to start with which team currently in a playoff spot can Ottawa beat out? So obviously right now Ottawa ranks like at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, but that's by points because they play way less games. So yeah, you're gonna have to pull up the standings because we've got. I'll start while you're pulling that up. So right now, the Eastern Conference is New York, the Rangers, Boston, Florida, Toronto, the Islanders, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Washington. So those are the playoff teams. So obviously, you look at the bottom of that, and my answer for this one, which team can they beat out, is going to be the bottom four teams, which is like kind of nuts because that's a lot of teams. But that's the Islanders, Red Wings, Flyers, and Capitals. So those teams, to me, honestly, like Detroit, I know they've had a hot start, right? They're on a bit of a skid though. Philadelphia to me is a complete pretender. They're not even going to make the playoffs. I really don't think that they are this whole Tortorella magic thing. Like I think they've had a good start to the year, but I don't think it's sustainable. Washington, I'm shocked that Washington's 14-8-3. That's completely bonkers to me when you look at their lineup and look at how they started the year. Like I don't even know how they're succeeding. But again, to me, it just screams pretender. Like I don't know how this is sustainable with the roster that they have. And then who's the other one? New York, the Islanders, 13-7-7, massive loser energy. Like they've lost 14 games. They're 13-14. They just make it to overtime a lot of nights. So is that sustainable? Is that a sustainable recipe to make the playoffs? I don't think so. That'll be consistently like 7 of their however many games has already gotten to overtime and they've lost. Like that just doesn't seem like that's going to add up. So to me, a lot of loser points on those teams, and I think that Ottawa, if they can kind of keep this going, they're going to be 12-11 if they win tonight. Like I think those teams are all very beatable. But do you have the same kind of thought, or do you have maybe a little bit of a bold take? Toronto's up there, 14-6-5, right? What are you thinking?
Yeah, the Leafs have been kind of uninspiring. Fewest regulation wins, I think, of any playoff team. Yeah, regulation or overtime win, to be honest. So, like the row or whatever in that standings, that they have 10. Next closest is the Islanders and the Caps with 12. So they've won some shootout games. Haven't won a ton in regulation. Obviously, beat the Sens in regulation, which sucks. But I mean, they're an option. I'm not going to say them because it's the Leafs and they're going to make it. But yeah, like the thing is with the Metro, like right now it's early, right? So their points line up with the Atlantic, but no one in their right mind is taking the Rangers, Islanders, Flyers, and Caps over the Bruins, Panthers, Leafs, and Red Wings right now, right? So I'm going to say that Ottawa can pass the Red Wings because I think the Red Wings are frauds. I think the Sens have proven that twice this season. Like they're a good team. They don't get me wrong, but with the injuries that they've had now and like suspensions and everything like that, they've lost 3 in a row all of a sudden. With Patrick Kane, they haven't won a game. I think the Red Wings are primed for a drop off a little bit here. I'm going to say the Capitals over the Flyers. Like I think the Caps will fall out before the Flyers do. I think Tortorella is one of the best coaches in the NHL, and like doesn't have a long shelf life in places, and people hate him by the end of his tenure every time. But a lot of guys, I listened to Del Zotto on Chicklets the other week. Obviously, we talked about that, but I think Tortorella probably gets more hate than he deserves because consistently he gets results. That roster has no business being where they are, and yet they are. And they had a good start last year, from what I remember too. This year's different. They got Couturier back, so like I can see the Flyers kind of sticking around, being a bit of a thorn for teams down the line. Not gonna bet the house on them making the playoffs, but I'm not gonna doubt Tortorella ever. So that's kind of where I'm at. Capitals, I don't think will sustain it, and the thing is with the Metro, you got to assume one of the Devils, Hurricanes, or Penguins are going to get up there somehow. I'm betting on the Devils doing it. So that's where I'm at. Like it's pretty tight still, even though they're pretty far back and there's a lot of teams in between them. In the Atlantic, though, yeah, it's just Detroit for me. Like I don't see the Sens beating out Tampa, Toronto, Florida, or Boston. Even though I'm not worried about the way they match up against those teams, if that makes sense. Just where the Sens are at right now in the standings, like it's tough with points and they got to win a ton of games. They got to win all these games in hand to even put themselves in the conversation. But you look at wins, and I know we talk about loser points, but you this is crazy. The Leafs have 5 overtime losses. The Islanders have 7. They're 13, 7, and 7, right? That's under 500. Like most of these teams technically are over 500 or under 500. So that gives a little bit of faith, I think I would say. But yeah, the Sens have to get hot to do it because these teams aren't going to keep losing every game. And if they do, someone else will take their spot. So it's tough. It's going to be tough, but those are the guys. Like Red Wings is the one I'm circling. Like the Red Wings, I don't know, man. I'll be shocked if they finish that much ahead of Ottawa by the end of the year.
Well, they've got injuries now too, so like yeah, it can kind of be expected that they're going to fall off a little bit. The tough thing with the playoffs is that those teams I just mentioned, but then you've also got Tampa at 9, New Jersey at 10, Carolina at 11. Like there's a lot of teams in the hunt here, and I expect all those teams to be competing for a spot. So it's going to be hard for Ottawa. I know you said before the year you expected them or wanted them to get like your prediction was that they were going to get top 3 in the Atlantic. It just seems like their bad start has put them too far behind to be able to do that. Maybe if they go on a crazy 13-game winning streak like New Jersey last year, but at this point, like it seems like we're vying for a wild card spot, right? So we'll see what happens, but that's a lot of teams in the mix. And then just to conclude this before the puck drop here, we're gonna go with what qualities should the next GM have? And you know what? I'll start it off. My number one is just going to be communication. That's what I'm going to go with, and that's just because it's been such a breath of fresh air with Steve Staios, Michael Andlauer, the new ownership group, everything. Like it's been so good to just hear a GM come out, talk candidly, like just get to the point, tell us no fluff, no BS, just kind of get everything out that we need to know, and then wrap the press conference up. Like Pierre Dorion was famous for his lack of communication or his issues communicating. And that was the whole Melnick era, really, is they'd come out, it would feel like they're lying to you every time they have a press conference. They'd say things like, trading Mark Stone was my proudest day as GM. Like, it's just these things that kind of rub you the wrong way. And it felt like with Pierre, like every time he talked to the media, he would say something like that. And it would just be this huge thing, and everybody in the league would laugh at us. So communication is going to be my number one thing for a GM. I want to hear, like, you hear some of these top teams GMs come out and they just inspire confidence. Like they talk about a player they acquired or the players they're looking at, and it's like you just trust them, right? And I never had that trust with Pierre. I always felt like he was going to acquire the wrong players. I felt like he was going to make a bit of a laughing stock of the Sens. So my next GM, I just want them to be able to come out, give us candid press conferences, and honestly be like Steve Staios. Like that's what I'm looking for, is someone who can kind of speak well and communicate to the fan base well, because I think that's a huge thing for Ottawa moving forward, is the trust in the fan base and the team. Like that has to be a bridge that gets rebuilt for me.
That's a good one. And mine's kind of gonna be along those lines, but it's managing people. Like I don't want to get these stories of, and it'll probably, I mean, that'll fall on Staios more than anything. I think Staios will be responsible for managing like people in hockey operations and all of that. But Dorion, we talked about it, but part of his downfall was the way he managed people and the way he interacted with players. I don't think a lot of players enjoyed playing for him as GM. So I think, yeah, just someone with management background, maybe, in some capacity. But again, like I like that you mentioned the communicating and just telling us what they're going to do and whatever, and that is all fine. And I think there does come a point though where, if we go 2 seasons into this thing and Staios and the Sens still haven't won anything and haven't made the playoffs, then every time Staios goes up to the podium, we're all going to be like increasingly frustrated. So I think that was a bit of Pierre Dorion's downfall. Certainly very different situations, but yeah, I just someone who extends the olive branch that Andlauer and Staios have shown us, right? Like that's been the like you mentioned, the press conferences have been home runs for both of them every time, in my opinion. And I think that if that can just bleed into the GM and you can get that confidence when they're talking about the hockey team, that'll go a long way. I think for fans, for players too, it's underrated for the players. I think when their GM can go up there and confidently answer questions about the direction of the team. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the GM. It's a great question though. What quality should the next GM have? It's actually one that you can kind of talk about forever, to be honest. Like just what do you want in a boss, right? And you want someone who can communicate with your employees, communicate with the fan base properly, and at the end of the day, just put a winning product on the ice and show that I want someone who can show that they can make tough decisions without being, like it's a really fine line between making a tough call and being respected. I think, and it really does sound like I'm ragging on the guy here, but I think Pierre Dorion lacked respect maybe around the NHL, maybe just in Ottawa with the players that came in, the older guys who came in. That could be it too. But I think overall, I mean, the Dadonov situation is a perfect example of it, right? Like where that just like he got fired because he would not be able to make a trade after that because no one would believe him and all of that. So I think a general level of respect, and that probably comes with someone with management experience in the NHL. That's kind of where I'm at. I just want a guy who is well respected around the league, and I know that NHL teams get a lot of flack for recycling head coaches and recycling GMs, but honestly, I think in Ottawa it's something that I would welcome. I'd welcome a coach like Jacques Martin, who's been around for a long time, or a guy like I don't know, like a GM who's been around a long time, like not Peter Chiarelli, but you know what I mean? Something along those lines would be ideal for my GM wish list. That's kind of how I'll put it. But that's something that could happen in the summer. It could happen tomorrow for all I know. I don't really understand what their plan is going forward with the GM here. I wouldn't be surprised if Steos just keeps the title at the end of the day. But again, Andlauer did say he likes that two-headed monster. So we'll see. We'll see what they do here. We're approaching puck drop. We'll give people a little bit of a 10-minute buffer here. So appreciate everyone who was joining us here. Again, apology if you were on the Twitter trying to comment along. Forgot to kind of mention that you got to head over to the YouTube to do that with the new Twitter system and all of that, whatever it is. So next time we will be sure to let people know about that. But we appreciate everyone watching nonetheless. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube account. Like the video as well. We had a lot of likes before we even started, I noticed, which is great. Goes a long way to support us. So we thank everyone for joining us. We'll see everyone next time. And let's get some Go Sens Go in the chat. A big game in Ottawa. The 500 barrier is going to break one way or another tonight. All those 500 stats I was putting out. So thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you all next time and enjoy the game tonight.